she also has like, even to this day, has zero boundary, but like to the level of like, I don't feel physically safe. The way she behaves, even at a 33-year-old me, it's I don't know if you can relate to this, but she behaves like she owns me. It's like she
Yeah.
is my owner instead of my mother.
Hello, and welcome to another new episode of Hearts Wide Open. Today, unfortunately, as you probably can see, we don't have Dennis. Dennis is coming back from a birthday party in Belgium. But instead of Dennis, I have one of my dearest friend, Alican, with me. That I've been wanting to talk about the topic that we're going to talk about today for a long time. Unfortunately, we couldn't have him in person, but I think the topic was so interesting that we wanted to really do it with him and have him on the podcast. And the topic that we want to talk today is about really the relationship as a toxic parenting and how you deal with that as a kid and how it evolves into you as a young adult and your future as an adult, and how can you transform from that toxic relationship from your parents. Before we jump into the topic, maybe Alican, you want to give yourself a quick introduction so everybody know who you are, man.
Yeah, hi, my name is Alican. I'm originally from Turkey. I've basically I was born and raised in Istanbul, moved to Ankara for a few years for work, and then from there, basically, I just wanted to come to the Netherlands, and I moved to the Netherlands about 3 years ago to work here. Um, I just got a house, so this is my place for the first time. So that's like we have this excitement of just moving to our own place, and I'm about to get married at the end of this month.
Congratulations,
Thank you,
congratulations.
thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah, when Soroosh and I, we meet up sometimes because we used to work together, and we talked about him having this podcast. I was also interested, and I kind of like shared a little bit of my story with him, and yeah, thought about coming over as well. So that's mostly why I'm here. Me and Sarush first met about 3 years ago. We were working at the same place for a while, but even after not working at the same place for the past 2 years or so, we've stayed friends, which is very nice. And I really do like what he's essentially like doing with this men's mental health thing, because I feel like it is a part of life that is very easily ignored. And I feel a lot of people try not to talk too much about it because they don't want to be vulnerable, but I'm particularly looking to open my heart wide open here with you guys, because I think it's going to be mainly not just for me, but for me as well, to be honest, but for the people who are listening, who might be going through similar things that I went through, that might be helpful. Because yeah, there's been some very dark times in my past where I felt like I was super desperate, but then
Yeah.
I ended up just fine. So I'm hoping that's gonna be nice. And from my perspective as well, a lot of the things that has happened, I even maybe forgot along the way, and it's kind of cathartic to maybe like walk through that aisle again. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was also excited
What is
actually.
the word you said? Cathart?
Cathartic,
What does that
cathartic.
mean in
So
simple English terms?
basically, it says providing psychological relief through the open expression of strong emotions causing catharsis.
Ah,
So
okay.
that's pretty much it. But also, often in like storytelling, something bad happens, and then like
Yeah.
it's a cathartic experience for the people to like live through it all, and succeed on top of it, and get the better of it, is what I would also add to it. Um,
Thank you very much for the beautiful introduction. And thank you for opening up. I do find you quite a very open person. And with my guy friends, usually you try to probe and ask questions and, hey, how did you feel this way? But with Alijan, even though we don't meet much, but every time we meet, we just yeah, pour everything out. How are you really doing?
Yeah.
And I'm very happy for you this year, man. Honestly, from the bottom of my heart, feel
Thank
like
you.
everything going well with you. Got a new house,
Yeah.
getting married, maybe getting a new dog.
Soon, yeah.
Soon, let's
Supposed to be
see.
born
Let's.
any day now.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Jumping into the topic of parenting, that's where I would like to start, because
Yeah.
for me that's where the story started in my
Mhm.
mind, and particularly maybe the relationship that you had with your father and mother.
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe you could walk us through
Sure.
the story a little bit, how it started, and why is it present for you now?
Um. So, I think basically growing up, I don't remember too much about my childhood, so I don't want to make a lot of mistakes. But my mother was very strict with certain things with me when I was growing up, especially like things that are like health related. You know what like a flat being flat footed or whatever is, like your foot is flat or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know how to translate it exactly, but it was like this condition that I had, and the doctor suggested like, oh, I should swim, right? And from that day on, my mother would force me to swim every day, and like I would hate it so much, and she would just force it on me all again and again and again for my own benefit, she would say. But like that kind of like puts it into a little bit perspective because now people that knew us back then, like my aunts or like my friends' mothers and stuff, are very critical of my mother as well. So it's not just me because when you're in the situation, and when you're like the kid or something, you think it's normal, right? And then looking back, you're like, was it really normal? But then if other people that
Mm.
are adults at that point in age go like, yeah, what your mother was doing to you was not okay.
And what was this
Um,
thing that you say your mother was doing to you?
this was basically just like how she would force me to swim every day. She was very strict with certain things and
Yeah.
very relaxed with others. Right? Growing up, I had like nannies and stuff. Like I don't know if that's a normal thing in Iran, but it was kind of normal in like let's say high middle class in Turkey, where you have cleaning ladies, you have nannies who help you out for like their living, like au pairs is what they call it as well, I guess. I had them a lot growing up,
Mm-hmm.
and to be honest with my father, I love my father even to this day. Like we have a great relationship. He's done so much for me growing up and stuff. But also when I was a kid, he wasn't around too much either because of work. So that's not like his fault necessarily, but he was working very hard and he wasn't around too much. So it was mostly me, my nanny, and my mother.
To take a step back, is
Hmm.
this your parents are still together and this
No, no,
time
no,
that you're
no, no, no.
telling a story, or
Oh,
maybe
at
how
that
old
point.
you are?
Yeah, so it's interesting because again, as a kid you don't realize these things. They were
Yeah.
together, but didn't really feel like they were together at a lot of those points.
So
Like I
physically.
yeah, I don't really remember too much of them interacting with each other to be fair, in like a loving relationship way.
Hmm.
Um I think to be honest, my father was trying to get away from my mother as well because he had realized what kind of a person she is.
Hmm.
Um, and then when I was about 11, they divorced, like properly divorced. And after that, I actually saw my dad much more consistently, like every Sunday and everything like this, right? Um, also, a lot of the things that I'm saying, I feel like I'm also influenced with what my mother told me back then as well, because it's really hard to remember things as they were happening when you're a kid, like how
Yeah.
often they happened and stuff like that. A lot of things get jumbled. So I don't really want to like talk too certain about that necessarily. But
It's from your point of view,
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
you
it's from my point of
remember.
view. Yeah, what I do remember is like I didn't see my father too much when I was like really little, but then once they divorced, I he was a much bigger part of my life.
Mm.
And yeah, with my mother basically like uh I was scared of her. I think a lot of the times I was scared of her. And what my therapist said later was like a lot of the times like it doesn't feel like what she gave you was motherly love, right? Like my therapist also judged her very harshly, and at some point we'll get to it later. She even met her. So,
Mm.
but yeah, that's mainly it. I think like growing up, it was mostly like me and my mom, and my mom was like she worked a little bit in her life, but the problem with her is that she worked maybe like 2 3 years out of like the 60 years that she's alive for, more or less, like 58 years that
Hmm.
she's alive for. So she was mostly home like playing bridge, and that's like
Doing
her
what?
thing, playing bridge. You know what the
Playing
game
bridge?
bridge is?
No.
So it's this card game basically. It's like a intelligence-based card game, kind of similar to like a
Hmm.
chess or something like that.
Ah,
But it's
okay.
something what mostly like old people do, right? She would
Yeah.
play it like online, very often, and got pretty good at it, and eventually like got into like national team and stuff like this at some
Hmm.
point in her life. Yeah, yeah, she did just fine
Okay.
in that regard. But like that's all she did. That meant a lot of like um I don't know. It's just like she was home very often, basically. Like she was home 24/7, and I feel like we interacted a lot, which made
Hmm.
us also, get on each other's nerves more often, I suppose. But I don't think, to be honest, the childhood part was that bad for me,
Hmm.
regardless. Because I think I ended up fine. It's what happened later with my mother that kind of like put things more into perspective, what had happened before, as well as like what's really going on. It was basically slowly as I became an adult, I was like, okay, my mother is not a normal person, right?
Before
Hmm.
we move toward you being an adult,
Yeah.
me as a third person listener,
Hmm.
I felt like I do feel like still maybe your mother is being to a side that it's not a very good parent, but for I'm still not sure why reason. Maybe it's
Yeah.
because of the things that happen in the future.
Yeah.
But I would like to take one step back
Hmm.
to when I don't know to 10-year-old Alijan,
Hmm.
if you can remember him.
Hmm.
And yeah, what is life like? It's you yeah, in a
What was
week
like
you come
life
home.
like in 10 years old? Well, 10
How's
years.
the yeah?
Yeah. So the good thing about when I was 10 is we lived
Hmm.
in this like apartment complex with like it was a really good place, and it had its own like garden and its tennis court and everything, and there were other kids around my age.
Hmm.
So often me, my cousin who's 1 year older than me, and like our neighbors and stuff, we would, get together and play games and stuff like that. So I actually had a really nice childhood in the perspective of like very active, a lot of friends, constantly playing games, like not necessarily like video games or something, which we also did obviously, but also like a lot of like,
Physical
tag,
yeah.
physical games like tag, or surrounded by greenery in the middle of Istanbul. Just a lot of like fun adventures that I had back then. And that was a lot of the time that I had spent before I kind of started like kind of merging off, like branching off from my friend group to play more online games myself.
Hmm.
That's like at 10-year-old, I was mostly doing those kind of stuff.
And when you
And I
come
think,
home, how
yeah,
is
when
it
I
when you
come home,
come
there
home?
would be the nanny still,
Okay.
probably having made like some sort of food or something.
Mm.
And like, I think like my mother would be, on her computer playing bridge. I mean, it's just like regular days are hard to necessarily pin down. It's just like bits and pieces I remember of just like how scared I was of my mother at that particular time. Like one time,
What
uh,
is that time? Walk us through that one
oh,
time.
like for example, I was about 10 at this actually. I was exactly 10, I think. I started learning guitar like when I was like 9 years old. And at 10 years old or something, I had this tutor that came to our house and gave me lessons. And I'm 10 years old. Imagine that. And at and I was alone at home at this point. And the guy comes and then he gives me the lesson, but instead of 1 hour, he does 50 minutes. And he goes, "I need to leave. I have somewhere to go. Can I leave 10 minutes early?" He asked me. This like 40-year-old man is asking 10-year-old kid for permission. And I was like, "Sure, why not? What am I gonna say? No, you can't go." He leaves. Right after that, my mother comes home. And she goes, "Where's the guitar teacher?" And I say, "Well, he wanted to leave." And she berated the shit out of me, chased me around the house saying, "How could you let him go? How could you let him go? We pay money for that guy." Like took her slipper into her hand and started chasing me
Like
around.
every other Middle Eastern mom.
Exactly. And the thing is, it feels funny like perspective. When you were a
Retrospective.
kid at that age, you're like, "What did I do wrong?
Yeah.
Why am I being chased down?" And I was so scared. Like that's one of the things that comes to my mind, like how she was just chasing me, yelling at me, making such a big deal out of it. But I'm just a kid, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do you expect some 40-year-old guy to just, for me to like keep him at the house because it's like we're paying money for this guy or something? Like, that's expecting too much from a kid, right?
Yeah.
Um, Now looking back at it, I can think of this clearly, but at that moment I couldn't. There was another point where a lot of like, I think like a mobile phone, like they had just come out, like Ericsson and stuff like that, kind of, and one of them was home and it got missing, and somehow I got blamed for it. Like, how did you miss? Like, how did you lose this? And she berated me a lot for that too.
Were you
I,
the only child?
I was the only child. Yes, I was the only child, and I was really scared. So, scared of getting a sibling. There was a lot of like nightmares during those times. And then I think from that point on, you know how I slept every night? For maybe until I was like 14, with like a blanket over my head.
Hmm.
For like 7, 8 years, like a something over my head to kind of like protect me or something. Like, I was really scared. Like, I was really scarred. I couldn't
What
sleep
are you?
without like.
What
Hmm?
were you scared of?
Nothing in particular. I think just like I felt safer when I was under the blanket, or like there was something on top of me. I guess maybe like what I had seen, like what I could see, that kind of stuff. Like I had like paralysis demon once, but that was like way later in my life. Like sleep paralysis. So
Hmm.
I don't think it was anything like that necessarily, but it does think like it does make me think of like there was something that I was scared of seeing, most likely, that I had to have the cover over my head,
Okay.
and then it
Okay.
would get like really stuffy under there. It was actually really uncomfortable, but I
Yeah, I can
still had to
imagine.
do it to sleep.
Okay. Um. So now I have a good
Mhm.
overview of how it was for you as a kid, and how was it with your dad? You never mentioned your dad in this
Yeah,
stories. In
so
this.
like I said, like he wasn't there too often. I really loved him, and he was like very affectionate in a
Yeah.
physical way that I
Yeah.
think also shaped how I show love
Yeah.
in a physical way. So, like, people say like love language. Some people give gifts, some people give
Yeah. Yeah.
compliments. For me, it's like hugging and like squeezing someone's cheeks, or like kissing them
Yeah.
or something like that. So that's also why, for example, when you and I get together after like not seeing each other for 6 months, we hug like really,
Yeah.
really hard for like a while, and I really like that. That's like very important to me because that's how I grew up. Like my father's way of showing love to me was very like pinching my cheeks, uh, kissing me like kissing competitions we would have. Who's gonna kiss
Oh.
more or something like that. Like like just hugs and everything, like very 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 physical. So to me, it overall became that. And once, like I said, like after 11, uh I had started seeing him more, and then like he probably like shaped me the most out of anyone that I know when it comes down to like world overview of literature, cinema, all of these things, like art, music. Like he's my biggest influence, right? Like growing up, I looked up to him so much.
Mm.
It was just a
Mm.
shame that I could only see him like once a week. But
Okay.
even to this day, the guy is almost 60 and he works like 12 hours
Crazy.
a day or something,
Interesting.
Yeah.
So no, I understand. To have a quick uh, side story here,
Hmm.
for me, also one of my love languages is physical touch, and that's how I show my love and
Hmm.
passion for someone. But for me, I don't know. It maybe comes from never receiving it. Like for
Hmm.
me as a kid, we were not like
Hmm.
my dad was also the same. My dad, he was very hardworking.
Hmm.
I barely saw him, but to this day I can count the number of times I touched that man, which
Damn.
is yeah,
Yeah,
which is
that's kind
every
of
time.
sad. Yeah.
It is sad, but
What about with your mother? Were you? No, I'm turning it on you, by the way. Like, what about
no,
with your
that's
mother?
okay.
Did you
This
have
is
a
with
physical
my
relationship with her?
mother, definitely more. Like she was more
Mm,
of a hugger per se, but still not that much. I think
I see.
I think when I moved away from Iran,
Mm.
and because in Iran we also don't hug with someone. I think in
Mm-hmm.
Turkey is the same. You handshake and then you give three
Give you a
kisses on the cheeks. No, no, no.
Yeah,
In Turkey, you
you're the head nowadays. It used to
the
be
head.
more like that. Now it's like even less gay guys. Like just touch your heads to each other. Like
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
And I don't know. There's almost no emotion in it. Maybe in a
Mm,
good handshake there is, but when I moved here,
mm.
I really got into hugs.
That's good, no, but it means a lot for you because in the
Yeah,
case of like you haven't had that, you kind of overcame that, right? Like
yeah,
overcame that limitation that you had from your childhood. I think that's kind of like a story of accomplishment that it is
yeah,
your love language
yeah,
now, you know?
yeah. No, it
Like the
is.
fact that your childhood didn't affect you so much. I think that's a very important thing.
Well, it did, I think, but
Or rather like you moved past it or like you
yeah,
accomplished something over it.
I try to. But I think
Yeah.
some of the things I did, and now I do hug. So
Yeah.
whenever I go back to meet my mom, I think from 2 years
Mm.
ago, 3 years ago, I did really hug her, and then she got
Mm.
into it. So now every
Oh,
time she just comes randomly
that's cute.
somewhere in the house and start hugging.
Mm.
But still, my dad is very awkward. Like every time I hug my dad, I do feel it that this man feels uncomfortable because he has
Do it
never
anyway.
been hugged. This man has never been hugged in his life,
Yeah.
and it makes me a little bit sad.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, so for me, love is physical. When I do something physical with
yeah,
someone, then I do feel like if I don't love them, then I feel kind of like dissociated with the
same,
act that I'm doing.
same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a good
Hmm.
little side story on love languages.
Yeah.
Okay, but to recap a little bit
Hmm.
about your story. So from until kid or around teenager, your
Hmm.
father was a very hardworking man that
Still is, to be honest.
still
It's just
is.
like he took Sundays off for me, you
Son
know?
is off,
Yeah.
yeah, and then he was not home or visible to you that much, but when he was very physical,
Hmm.
and he was giving you love. Your mother was more home and the nannies, but
Hmm.
you found that situation a little bit strict, or you were
Yeah.
blamed for certain things
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
maybe not directly your fault.
Yeah.
And then they got divorced, and
Hmm.
maybe you could walk us through the story from this point.
What I remember is when they got divorced. I had a dog, and that's his name was Safran because he was a golden retriever. And I remember my uncle took me out to you know talk to me about the divorce. My uncle
Mhm.
from my mother, like my mother's little brother, and we went out with me, him, and Safran, and we went out to this like field where he was like we were taking the dog out necessarily, and he was talking to me about like how are you? Are you holding up well and stuff like this. And I remember being like unnaturally mature about the whole divorce thing because my mother had talked to me, and it was apparently even my idea that they get divorced and stuff like that. So when the divorce actually happened, I am told, and also I do know that I was very unaffected by it. Now, most likely it was because I wasn't seeing my dad so much anyway. It's not like we were a family. I don't remember ever like the three of us sitting on a table and eating together. And that is something that I thought was just normal for me. But once I started like seeing my other friends at school that I'm going to, and they all are like, "Oh, at 7 we all eat together at the dinner table." I was like, "What's going on?" I was like, "What the hell?" And seeing actual families like function, I started feeling like, okay, maybe something is wrong with us. But apart from that, I think a lot along the way, I think it's kind of like a bad indicator that I was mostly unaffected by the divorce. Like
Mhm.
at that point, everyone was like, "Oh, it's nice. Like Alican doesn't care. It's fine. He's okay with the divorce, guys. We don't have to bother." But now when I'm thinking, I would have been like, "Why is he not affected?" Like, your parents getting divorced is supposed to be such a big thing when you look into like certain media or something like that. You see like, oh, the kids parents divorced, it's his fault, like they kind of like push his buttons, like the kid always thinks like it's my fault and gets like really depressed or like has certain emotions that I've never gone through myself. Like I never thought it was my fault. I was never sad that there was a divorce, etc. But I think that speaks for itself as well. And then after that, I think what happened is, well, okay, so as the dog that I mentioned,
Yeah.
uh, we'll get to like the story later. But what happened is when I was about like 12, I went to space camp, and when I came back, they told me Saffron is gone. And they said like someone probably stole him or he ran away. And then I cried for months. Me and my uncle looked for him for months. I was devastated because I loved this dog like more than anything at that point, right? Like it was my like I loved him so much that I named everything that I have after him, you know?
Saffron.
Yeah, Saffron, Safi, like those are the things that I kind of did. Um and like so we'll leave that story there for now and
Okay.
we'll come back to it later because there's obviously
Sure,
like a
sure,
plot
sure.
twist there. But I think about that time I started feeling worse when the dog was gone, and as I started like growing up, I started feeling really dissociated from people um, that are my age, right? Like the people
Mm-hmm.
that I had just mentioned to you that are that we were like playing games all the time and stuff like that, just hanging out and everything. I started like kind of not wanting to hang out with them as much anymore, etc. And a lot of it also came from the fact that like I was pretty intelligent as a kid. Like I was, I was taking like university level like linear algebra when I was just in sixth grade and stuff like this, right? Um, uh, Not just like academically, but also like art wise. Like my father was showing me like these movies when I was like 14. I was like really into Quentin Tarantino, like I was memorizing Pink Floyd lyrics when I was like six,
Mm.
even though I
So you
couldn't
were
speak English yet.
educated. You
It's
were
not just
educated in that
education.
sense.
Yeah, I think it's not just educated. I would say also a little bit kind of, when you think about it, a little bit kind of
Taste.
um it's like my dad was putting his taste in me,
Yeah,
right? A
yeah,
little bit
that's
as
how
well,
it is.
like kind of like defining me as well. But that also meant that like when my friends were listening to like the newest pop songs or stuff, I wasn't interested, right? So it kind
How
of
old are
like,
you here?
I think between basically like 12 and 14, like 12 and 15, that's when most of the like separation happened between me and my friends. Also, another thing is I was never really good at sports. Like, just never good at any sports. To the level that like my tennis teacher told my mom, like, don't bother, like, don't waste your time with this kid. And I think if you're bad at something, you don't want to do it that much, right? There was that part of it too. Like, I didn't want to do things that I was bad at. I wanted to do things that I was good at, which was more like, mathematics or like,
Mm-hmm.
um, gaming, all of these things.
Yeah,
And that
yeah.
time also, like around 12 is when I moved schools. I met many more people and I made friends with them, and they were into online gaming. So like we started playing like Ultima Online, Ragnarok Online, back then, like these kind of like MMORPGs. Those were the times where like I started actually going more into like the virtual space, and I don't think my mother really restricted me too much. And then I started like seeing myself like enjoying or getting that dopamine hit from playing games that I'm good at, and like enjoying kind of like leveling up or like achieving things instead of like going out and like playing goalkeeper and getting scored on and then people make fun of me and all of these things, right? Or like
Yeah.
we play tag and I'm too slow and everyone just like beats me and stuff like this. So I think that's also like a separation happened in my life, but it also like slowly degenerated me in the way that like I started feeling worse now. Right? I basically became depressed at a very young age. Through my life, I went to therapists about like 6, 7 times, different therapists, and either they were just unhelpful and didn't do anything, gave me some sort of like very basic antidepressant and told me to go away, or just the last one that basically helped me that we're gonna get to later on in this episode, right?
Yeah.
Um, so basically I had like bad experiences with them. But I will just say basically like a teenager, Alican was a very, very, very sad and lonely person,
Okay.
and found more solace in playing like World of Warcraft than anything else in his life, and
I
started like
see.
hanging out with people in real life less, and just all of these things. And I think that also is like indication of how unhappy I was with my home life,
Mm.
the things that I was going through.
Okay. So then probably after the divorce and um you changing schools, you I think maybe also partially hanging out more with your dad, that he was more into this
Mm,
complex stuff,
yeah.
more grown up things,
Hmm.
more complicated movie.
Hmm.
Maybe you did develop a taste, which was maybe not around your age, for something more complicated and more mature.
Yeah.
And what I understood, you were not good at physical stuff, so you
Mhm.
started into the games, and you also found friends that are were good at
Mhm.
these games, and you found this
Mhm.
online world that makes you happy, and then you stuck with it,
Yeah.
and nobody told you to slow down.
Exactly.
But then, like subconsciously, that made you a little bit depressed, and
I think
maybe
so. Yeah.
physically you didn't had much movement around, and this
Mm.
psychologically affected you. Correct?
I don't know if it was the lack of like physical activity that made me depressed. I think it was mostly the alienation from my friends and like
Yeah.
not being able to hang out with my peers without kind of looking down on them because they're just very basic or something.
Yeah.
I think that was maybe my like coping mechanism even, like oh they don't like me, it's because I'm better. I think that's a very common thing, like coping mechanism, to feel
Yeah.
you're superior
Superior.
because
Yeah.
it's because you're not accepted. So it ended up being fine in the long run, but I feel like it would have been better for me if I hung out with them more often back then and like
Yeah.
not just necessarily look down on them. I
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
where's the like correlation and causation here. Like, is it because I started liking those things that I started not liking these people, or is it because I wasn't liking these people? I looked into those things. I don't know which one is the causation here that kind of like made me feel alienated from my friends. And it's kind of hard to
Um,
like pin down to be honest.
I think it's hard to pin down. I'm asking myself, why did you
Mhm.
got into those advanced stuff? Because
Mhm.
probably to hang out with your dad, maybe, or you did enjoy the time you hang out with your dad.
Yeah.
That was kind of the higher love that you were trying to reach, while maybe that you know what I mean. Like, you either try to hang out with your friends, and then that kind of disassociate a little bit of the
Mhm.
time you hang out with your parents as a
Mhm.
kid, because I think more the
Mm.
normal sense, that's what is more normal, that you hang out with more kids
Yeah.
your age.
Yeah.
But then maybe because
Mhm.
your father wasn't there that much,
Mhm.
you wanted to subconsciously get that love
Like
from him.
compensate that maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe like I felt I would betray him if I liked all these stuff or something like
Yeah.
that. The
Or
yeah.
I want to be complex so I can be spend more time with this man.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. That's
maybe.
fair.
I'm not sure.
What I remember also around like the ages of like 16, 17, I was still playing World of Warcraft when people were studying like crazy. I was going to those schools, but I didn't like feel the necessity to study. And it was crazy that I was still like playing online games and stuff. It ended up being fine for me. I won university, but basically, yeah, I studied a little bit, and I got a really good score. I started studying like control engineering. But then what happened at that point is like I broke off completely from my mother because I was like 18, and I just didn't want to listen to her anymore about anything. Like I didn't let her dictate anything in my life anymore. I stopped doing swimming lessons around like age 15 or something. I just stopped doing like a bunch of things that she had kind of like piled on top of me. As I became 18, I kind of like said, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. Around that time, also, my grandmother got sick. Like she had cancer, and I'll say the person that took care of me the most when I was a kid was actually my grandmother. I started appreciating her as soon as she got like cancer, and I really like miss her even now because I think she was the person that gave me like the most motherly love in my life. That was a little draining for me
Yeah,
emotionally because like
can
just
understand.
watching this kind of like motherly figure to you slowly degenerate in front of
Mm.
you and collapse and lose all her hair and barely be able to get up and stuff, and kind of just like realizing I'm about to lose this unconditional love that I have that I never really received from my mother was really, really hard at that point. And then what happened, very interestingly, is around that time, also when I was about 19, my father introduced me his new girlfriend, or
Mm.
rather wife at that point, almost.
So a lot of
Um,
changes, or a lot of new
yeah,
things for you. Yeah.
yeah. My mother found out about her, and my mother got insanely jealous. Even though they were divorced for like 8 years at that point, or 9 years or something, like when she found out, she got insanely jealous and said like he has paid nothing to me. And because there was no paper trail, my father had to basically like he couldn't own anything, he couldn't rent anywhere, he couldn't do anything basically for about like 4 or 5 years straight up
Mm.
from like the time I was 20 to like 25 or something. And those were the worst years of my life because my mother was an alcoholic. So she would drink every
Mm.
night by herself in the living room and like smoke her cigarette and stuff just in the darkness. Nothing, like no TV, no nothing. She would just like drink in the dark. Like looking back now is so weird, right? Like just sitting by yourself in the dark and just drinking every night and stuff. And she would like attack me both verbally and physically in like different ways. And I had to live with her. I was still going to university as well. And like I said, I wasn't doing like great at university at all. Like I didn't like going, I didn't enjoy it, etc. And
Yeah.
then it became like with my grandmother's sickness, with my father's near reveal, and then with my mother doing this, and also
Yeah.
obviously my father stopped paying her entirely. Obviously, like why would I pay you if you're gonna just lie to the court? And then she started going through like financial difficulties as well, and I was living with her. My father always gave me money, never like made me feel less than or something in
Hmm.
any way. But it was still like struggling times. And then all of these happening at the same time, as I was also just like hating school. So I spiraled down. Like I remember I would. So at some point I stopped playing World of Warcraft. I started playing Dota instead.
Yeah.
And I really struggled with living in the real life, just living online, just playing all the time like games and stuff like this. And my mother would come home, and I would like feel this terror of like
Mm.
like just like instant terror in my bones that I would feel
So you didn't
as I
feel
knew she would
safe.
come. Yeah,
You
I,
didn't
I
feel
was never safe in
safe.
my house. Yeah.
Okay, that's a big thing.
Yeah, I was never safe in my house. So she would like come in, and I would always feel like she's gonna, punch the door, or you know what I mean, like yell at
Yeah.
me, or in some ways let's just like make trouble. Because what was mostly happening at that time, even though she would never admit it now because she's a narcissist, is she hated my father because of what had happened. I don't know also why, like because she never moved on properly and he did or whatever. She was jealous and she was taking all the hatred that she had for my father from me, right? Like you're just like your father, you're this, you're that, you're that, you're that. And just like telling me how my father doesn't love me, how she wishes she didn't give birth to me, and all of these like really nasty things almost every day, right? And it gets really bad of years of that. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
it's a little bit. People are like, "Oh wow, is that really what she did?" And now imagine that happening like every day she drinks, every day she attacks me verbally or more or whatever. It started weighing me down, and that's when my dysthemia started evolving, and
Mm.
I started basically getting this thing called double depression, which is it sounds cool, but it's not because it's dysthemia and major depression at the same time, right?
Mm. Man,
So
you're laughing, but
yeah,
I do feel it's a lot intense,
yeah.
and yeah, I'm sorry that you went through all that.
It's my coping mechanism to laugh about
I
it.
understand. It's a very difficult situation to be in, to not
Hmm.
feel safe with the people that supposedly they need
Yeah.
to take care of you and they need to give you unconditional love, and just you being there, what you told me, you being there in front of your mother, and she being mad at the world, and you're the first person to just be there, and she exposed all this madness and anger at you while you didn't really do anything since you were young. I think this is
Yeah.
what you said, since you were around 10 with the piano or the guitar
Hmm.
teacher,
Hmm.
to now it is very challenging.
Yeah.
And yeah, I understand if it's, and it's like, what are you going to do about it?
The thing is, in
It's
our
your mother.
culture, exactly, in our culture, like you don't really move out from your house
Oh,
until, when you're
until you get
gonna get
married.
married or something, or
Yeah.
you move away or something.
Yeah.
Like economy is not good that you can take like a part-time job and sustain yourself in like your own rental place, like it is in the Netherlands or something.
Yeah.
So also like culturally, you're supposed to stay with your family and take care of them as well. It's like a very codependent relationship that I'm not really very happy about in my
Yeah.
experience, like I don't like our culture when it comes down to that. A lot of things we do right, like hospitality, the generosity and all of these things that we have are the good things. Some of the bad are like how codependent family
Yeah,
members get with each other, and like
boundaries.
my mother was abusing me, and then people in Turkey go, yeah, but she's your mother, you should still forgive her, like fuck off, dude. What's wrong with you? You you don't know how many times I heard that. You know?
I understand.
Yeah. So yeah,
I still have this with my mother, by the way. Sometimes she
yeah.
calls me and she's like, "Oh, where were you? Who were you with?"
Uh
I'm like,
huh.
"Yeah, this is none of your business. And if I want to share it, I would share it with you." But then she's immediately, "But I'm your mother." And I'm like, "Yeah, but there's a boundary between us that you need
Exactly.
to respect." And she's like,
Exactly.
"No, with me, there's no boundary." And I'm like, "Whoa."
Exactly. So that's what we wanted to talk about, and that's the part of the story that we're in, where in
Yeah,
this time she also has like even to this day has zero boundary, but like to the level of like I don't feel physically safe. The way she behaves, even at a 33-year-old me, it's I don't know if you can relate to this, but she behaves like she owns me. It's like she
yeah,
is my owner instead of my mother. Like I'm just her thing. Whatever you want, whatever you need, it doesn't matter because you are mine. Like you belong to me, and then there is no reason for her to ever be like, at this point in our lives, why does he not talk to me anymore? You know what I mean? Because you've treated me as if the boundaries that I put for you, you just like go through them like nothing because you're my mother. Then the boundary that I'm going to put on you next is something that is going to be so high that you cannot go up. You
yeah.
cannot jump over this
It's
time.
probably gonna be physical. That
Yeah, it's
I
gonna be
don't
physical
want
or
to
just
see
like
you.
yeah, or just like not see you exactly that kind of thing, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
where it has evolved to eventually, right?
yeah.
Like,
So what did you do then?
so what happened is this one night, and I think that's like one of the most important nights, if not the most important night of my life, where I'm feeling particularly depressed, right? And I don't even know like if I have depression or anything at that point in my life, but I'm just like very suicidal to the
Hmm.
point that I would take solace in like I would feel relieved from imagining my own death.
Hmm.
I would think of myself dying in different kind of scenarios, and it would make me feel better about myself because I would be in control. I don't know if that makes sense, but like
Yeah,
it would be all like ridiculous ways, right? Like a giant thing crushes on me and I just die instantly, and I would fantasize about this, and that was kind of like my safe haven in my mind, just
but
like
then
thinking of my own death.
the constant pain is gone. This
Yeah,
isn't.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I was at a place that I was feeling so worthless that yeah, I really wanted to kill myself. I never really did it, but I always wanted it. You know what I mean? Like I never really tried for real, but I always like for years during those times I really wanted it. And this one night that
Hmm.
I'm talking about is one of like the worst times. And then I go out randomly.
Hey guys, this is Soroosh from the future, and I just wanted to say if you want to know what happened to Ali John on that night out, tune out to the next episode. You don't want to miss it out. See you there.